Behind every failed student, there is a teacher who destroyed them completely and used them as a tool, starting with the ones who raised us, the mentors from our childhood. Lotso from the Toy Story. Lotso is a pink-colored, strawberry-scented teddy bear who is also the leader of Sunside Daycare in Toy Story 3. Whenever new toys used to come to the daycare center, Lotso used to talk to them very friendly and nicely. He used to show them that he is a very caring and mature mentor, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was the dictator of Sunnyside Daycare, and he wanted his right to everything, and he used to control everything. Well, in my opinion, he is a bad teacher because his entire teaching style was based on manipulation and fear. He used to show a fake delusion world to new toys, where he used to show them nicely, but in reality, he was intentionally put in those danger rooms where toddlers used to come and play with them and break them. He used to live in a safe and secure room with his and his close followers, where mature kids used to come and play with them and consider them a part of their life. His entire leadership was not a guidance, but a control. And the worst moment was when he got a chance to become a hero, and he chose the dark side. This was the scene when all the toys were trapped on a garbage conveyor belt and were taken by the incinerator. At that time, Lotso could have saved everyone, but he didn't do anything like that. Instead of saving them, he himself left them there to die and was trying to escape from there. And Lotso's guidance had a very bad impact on the people around him. And some cute innocent characters like Big Baby and Ken, these two had also come under his manipulative tricks, and they were supporting his made system. But they say that what goes around comes around. He had to face a lot of bad consequences for this, where in the end, he betrayed everyone, and all the toys went against him, where in the end, his whole manipulative toxic system and all the rules he made get destroyed. And then Lotso is tied up in front of a garbage truck and he permanently lives there for the rest of his life. The fact is that Lotso was not a leader. He was also a dictator like ordinary politicians who used to put a mask of innocence. He never had any intention of teamwork or helping any toy. He just wanted people to live in fear in his system. Next, Gendo Ikari. He is the commander of NERV and the father of Shinji Ikari in Neon Genesis Evangelion. He is simultaneously Shinji's boss, his authority figure, and the one person whose approval Shinji desperately craves his entire life. Whenever Shinji needed his father, Gendo used to show him cold commands and distant authority. He used to look like a powerful leader on whom Shinji could trust, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was a manipulator who had abandoned his son years ago and only returned to use him. He used to control everything by fear and emotional famine. Well, in my opinion, he is a bad teacher because his entire teaching style was based on manipulation. He didn't teach Shinji anything, he weaponized him. After his wife Yui died, Gendo left young Shinji to be raised by a stranger with zero parental contact. Then he re-entered Shinji's life only to strap his traumatized, emotionally starved teenage son into a giant mech to fight apocalyptic monsters. He used to show Shinji a fake world where obedience meant love, but in reality, he was intentionally putting him in life-threatening situations with no training, no guidance, and no warmth. He used to live in his command center with his inner circle where he was safe and secure, making cold decisions. Meanwhile, Shinji was broken down mentally, forced into dangerous battles, stripped of his childhood. His leadership was not guidance, but control through fear. If Shinji didn't perform, he was worthless. And the worst moment was when Shinji arrived at NERV for the first time in years and was summoned by his father, and he believed that this might be a reunion, a moment where his father would acknowledge after all those years of absence. At that moment, Gendo could have been a real father, but instead, his response was immediate and cold. Get in the robot. No hello, no acknowledgement of the years of abandonment, just a command. He didn't save him, he betrayed him, and Gendo's control had a bad impact on the people who support him. Because all the rules of Gendo, all his commands, had made NERV a place of psychological torture where all the pilots around him that questioned his methods, they used to live in a fear environment where all the young pilots that came to NERV, if they didn't obey him, he used to punish them through isolation and emotional abandonment. And innocent characters like Shinji, Rei, and Asuka, these three had also come under his manipulative tricks, and they were supporting his system because they were starved for his approval. Shinji especially was so broken that he was willing to risk death repeatedly just for one moment of acknowledgement that never came. Their entire lives were destroyed by his control. But they say what you give is what you get, as he had to face a lot of bad consequences consequences for this. In the end, when his grand plan for instrumentality collapsed, all the pilots went against him. His whole manipulative toxic system and all the control he tried to maintain got destroyed. And then Gendo faced complete psychological destruction, not through physical punishment, but through confrontation with his own failures. He was forced to admit that he never knew how to face his son and was afraid of his own child. He lost everything because of his obsession with control. The fact is that Gendo was not a leader, he was a dictator like ordinary people, who put a mask of authority in power. His greatest crime wasn't a superweapon or a conspiracy, it was simply never once telling his son that he mattered. Next is Mother Gothel from Tangled. Mother Gothel is the primary antagonist of Disney's Tangled and the woman who raised Rapunzel in an isolated tower for 18 years. Whenever Rapunzel tried to learn about the world, Mother Gothel used to talk to her very sweetly and nicely. She used to show her that she is a very caring and devoted mother. On top of that, she used to look like a very protective guardian on whom Rapunzel could trust, but the reality was something else. Actually, she was a kidnapper who had stolen Rapunzel as an infant. She was a manipulator who wanted Rapunzel's magic hair to stay young and immortal forever. She used to control everything, Rapunzel's thoughts, her fears, her beliefs about herself. Well, in my opinion, she is a bad teacher because her entire teaching style was based on emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. She never taught Rapunzel anything useful about the real world. Instead, she taught her that the world is dangerous, cruel, and that Rapunzel is too naive and helpless to survive without her. She used to live in that tower with Rapunzel, pretending to be her mother, while secretly using her magic hair to stay young. Meanwhile, Rapunzel was psychologically broken down, conditioned to believe she was fragile, incompetent, and entirely dependent on a woman who viewed her as nothing but a tool. Her entire relationship was not love but control and manipulation. And the worst moment was when Rapunzel finally discovered the truth that she was the lost princess and that Mother Gothel had kidnapped her. At that time, she could have accepted the reality and let Rapunzel go, but instead, her response was kind of manipulative. She convinced Rapunzel that Flynn only wanted the crown, engineered his apparent betrayal, and dragged her back to the tower. She turned Rapunzel's greatest moment of self-discovery into a weapon against her. As soon as Rapunzel tried to stand up for herself and be independent, she felt guilty. Rapunzel was so brainwashed that she immediately believed Gothel's lies about Flynn. She had been taught to associate love with control, but later around, she had to face brutal consequences for this. When Flynn cut Rapunzel's hair, he stripped Gothel of the magic she had spent centuries killing and manipulating to preserve. Without it, she aged rapidly and crumbled to dust. The most frightening thing about her is that she was so good at manipulation. Even Rapunzel couldn't see it until it was almost too late. Next is Orochimaru from Naruto series. Orochimaru is one of the legendary San and An elite trio of ninja considered among the greatest ever produced by the Hidden Leaf Village. He was a prodigy, a former student of the third Hokage himself, and at one point was considered the most gifted shinobi of his generation. Whenever young ninja came to train under him, Orochimaru used to talk to them very intelligently and nicely. He used to show them that he is a very talented mentor and a powerful teacher, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was a monster who treated human beings as experiments and vessels. He wanted power above everything, and he used to control everything through manipulation and corruption. Well, in my opinion, he is a bad teacher because his entire teaching style was based on using people as tools for his own obsession. He never taught his students real ninja skills or moral values. Instead, he taught them that power justifies everything, that the only thing that matters is becoming stronger no matter the cost. He used to show his students a fake world where training meant becoming powerful, but in reality, he was intentionally pushing them to their breaking point, implanting cursed seals into their bodies without consent, which granted power but slowly corrupted their minds and bodies and created dependency. He used to operate in secret labs where he conducted horrific experiments. Meanwhile, his students were psychologically broken down, branded like animals, turned into vessels for his twisted ambitions. His entire relationship with his students was not mentorship, but exploitation and control through corruption. And the worst moment was what he did to Sasuke. Orochimaru approached a grieving, revenge-obsessed teenager at his most vulnerable right. After the Forest of Death tournament, when Sasuke had lost everything and was desperate for power. At that moment, Orochimaru could have guided him toward healing and real strength, but instead, he branded Sasuke with a cursed seal without consent. He didn't mentor Sasuke, he infected him. And then he spent years engineering circumstances to drive Sasuke away from everyone who could have saved him, purely to collect him as a future vessel for his own immortality. And Orochimaru's guidance had a very bad impact on everyone around him, because all the rules of Orochimaru, all his teachings, had made his organization a place of psychological torture and body horror, where all the students around him that questioned his methods, they used to live in a fear environment, where all the young ninja that came to train under him, if they didn't obey him completely, he used to punish them through painful experiments and deeper corruption. And innocent characters like Anko, Sasuke, and Kabuto, these three had also come under his manipulative tricks, and they were supporting his system because they were desperate for power. Anko was left with a cursed seal and psychological trauma for years. Sasuke's entire life was redirected toward darkness and isolation. Kabuto lost himself in a way that he began to physically transform himself into Orochimaru. His teachings destroyed them, but as you know, every coin have two sides, and yeah, later, he had to face consequences for this. He was defeated multiple times, sealed away and believed dead more than once. But the frustrating reality is that Naruto ultimately never killed him, and by the end of Shippuden, Orochimaru was essentially rehabilitated, walking free. Even participating in the Fourth Great Ninja War on the side of the heroes, his whole manipulative toxic system never fully crumbled the way it should have. He escaped true justice. Orochimaru is what happens when a genius is never taught that people are not tools. Each solved a severed relationship between teacher and student and turned it into a transaction. Give me your body, your loyalty, your future, and I will give you power. You were never meant to survive. And the tragedy is that the system that created him never fully answered for him either. Next is Shifu from Kung Fu Panda. The Master Shifu is the headmaster of the Jade Palace and the direct master of the Furious Five in Kung Fu Panda. He is a raccoon that was a student of the legendary Grand Master Oogway and devoted his life to his art and discipline, the Kung Fu. He is also the adoptive father to Tai Lung, the snow leopard that he nurtured as an infant and is lost at the most crucial point in a manner that has triggered the whole storyline. He would demonstrate to him that he is the one chosen, the one who is destined to be the Dragon Warrior. However, the truth of the matter was different. In fact, Shifu was using the means of creating a son, and at the same time using the means to destroy him. He wished Tai Lung to be something he was supposed to be, to do the impossible, to grow up to be the Dragon Warrior, not because it was what Tai Lung needed, but because it was what the identity of Shifu lived hinged on. To my mind, he is a bad teacher and a bad father, since his whole approach to mentorship was developed on conditional love in the form of devotion. However, in the real sense, he was purposely building the whole of Tai Lung on a destiny that was not Shifu to pledge upon a dragon scroll that was never assured, a validation that could be revoked any time. He gave his all to Tai Lung as he constructed the same circumstances that would ruin him. And the most bad part did not belong to drama and violence, but rather to silence in the Hall of Heroes, where Oogway stared at Tai Lung and said no. Tai Lung, who had sacrificed everything, who had been told that this is his time in his life, turned to the one person who had promised him everything. Shifu might have been a true father at that time. He might have defended his son. He might have reassured him that it did not matter how much his worth might be in the Dragon Scroll, and that he kept him in the rejection. However, he replied with nothing. He did not advocate, and instead of his son, he selected the posture of the institution. And the failure of Shifu affected all those under his command in a devastating way. Tigress was the victim of another variant of this damage. She's been brought up in the shade of Tai Lung. Having never felt the warmth with which Shifu had never shown his face to anybody after Tai Lung had betrayed him, Shifu was punished in the most personal and sincere way. He was afraid and guilty in the first movie. The arrival of Pole pushed him to face all he had buried, his failures with Tai Lung, and decide to be different. The thing is that Shifu was not an ideal mentor. He was a half-baked one, which in a way causes even greater harm, as the love was so real that it could hurt when it did not. He built a son, then he built a villain, never realizing that it was the same person after all. Next is Koro Sensei from Assassination Classroom. The main character is Koro Sensei, the homeroom teacher of Class 3E. of Kurugeoka Junior High School in Assassination Classroom, a tentacled, almost indestructible alien who travels at Mach 20, threatening to blow the Earth up before the year ends unless killed. He educates the children of Class 3E, a team of underachieving, discarded teenagers at the institution. Yet at the same time, he's preparing them to be his assassins. Kuro-sensei would talk to them with love and sincerity whenever he was in front of his classroom. He would demonstrate to them that he knows they have a potential and that they are good. Top of that, he would resemble a teacher who viewed them as individuals, but not as losers and a guide that they could rely on fully. Nevertheless, the truth was different. In fact, he was an animal that came in knowing that he would come out knowing that the parting would be brutal, and decided to go ahead and make himself the most significant individual in their lives. He was to instruct them as a practice to kill him, and he took this impossibility at its true value. Well, to me, he is an involved bad teacher since his whole association with Class 3E has been established upon a core lie that he never completely resolves. And the most terrible thing was not a moment of cruelty but of enlightenment, when the truth about his former life as the first Reaper was revealed, and the students understood that the man who made them believe they could achieve something was the murderer who was linked to the chain of the events that led the students to that very classroom. His friendliness and his wound could not be separated, and the pupils had to carry both of them without entirely calculating what it was. And the effect of Kuro-sensei on his pupils was far-reaching and twofold. All students of Class 3E developed, as the show rightfully deserves. Nagisa discovered purpose, Karma learned humility, Kano confronted her grief. It is actual change that results out of authentic mentorship. Yet all those students, too, spent their formative year emotionally attached to a person they were also conditioning to murder. They were instructed to love one and then kill him. They say what goes round comes around. There were repercussions to him. Kuro-sensei passed away peacefully in the hands of his students, having taken the time to ensure that they would all be fine without him in his last year of life. It is among the most heart-wrecking anime endings, but consequence is consequence. The thing is that Kuro-sensei is the worst bad teacher on any list and the most convoluted one. He is the villain who was never really a villain, the teacher who was never really a teacher, and somehow he was both, and he was both ideal. Next is Principal Skinner from The Simpsons. Seymour Skinner is a principal of the Springfield Elementary School and one of the most frequent figures of authority in The Simpsons. He is a Vietnam veteran, perennial mama boy, and a career school administrator who has devoted his career to managing a school whose budget is inadequate, understaffed, and constantly on the brink of failure. He is the direct figure of authority of all the children in Springfield and a professional superior of all the teachers such as Edna Krabappel. Skinner would give himself authority and professionalism anytime a group of students approached him with questions and requests regarding how to do things. He would demonstrate to them that he is an extremely committed administrator and a strict educator. However, the facts were different. In fact, he was a burned-out bureaucrat who misconstrued maintenance of order with education. Well, in my view, he is a bad teacher and a bad authority figure since all of his education strategy was founded on a bureaucratic survival. He did not even teach children to think critically and to grow. Institutional cowardice, arrested development, and codependency were the models that he modeled to each and every student who was observing him daily. His leadership was solely education but administrative theater meant to make the system appear functional, and it was literally letting down the children within it. And the worst of all was not an individual scene but a pattern, that every time a student, most commonly Bart Simpson, truly cried out to be engaged, and Skinner answered with an appeal to punishment, suspension, or administrative action. His failure was only caught in the episode where Bart was found out as possibly gifted. Here was Skinner given a truly smart, imaginative student, one with some actual potential. And the first thought that came to him was not to assist the student, but to be suspicious and fight against him. He saved the system and not the child. He observed a student who was not conforming, and his solutions were find a way to keep him in check rather than to grow him. Skinner might have been a genuine mentor at this time. He would have invested his potential in Bart. He would have had an opportunity to change his life. Instead, he reacted by being defensive of the institution. Bart Simpson was the most apparent victim of the failures of Skinner. He was actually a creative child, very active and bright, and had gone through a system that had no system and a figure whose main weapon was punishment. The show occasionally identifies that Bart might have become something in a different coding with alternative treatment, that his intelligence and charisma existed. All the children in the Springfield Elementary had become victims of mediocrity at the hands of Skinner. But they tell us that what circles round comes round. He always got it in the funny way, humiliated by Chalmers, cut off by his mother, outwitted by Bart. But in the institutional sense, he had but little. He continued to work decades with no regard to performance, whether he did a good job or not, and the system which allowed his mediocrity did not change in any meaningful way. His entire institution-toxic system did not really fail. The thing is that Principal Skinner was not a villain, and that is exactly what is meant. He is the image of institutional mediocrity, and that is precisely the reason that he is so devastating. Next is Medusa Gorgon from Soul Eater. Medusa Gorgon is one of the main antagonists of Soul Eater, and one of the most disturbing villains in the whole series. She works as a cover nurse in the DWMA, the Death Weapon Meister Academy, the school focused on producing students to attack witches and monsters. She is a witch that is centuries old, a brilliant scientist in black magic and biological mother of Krona. Medusa willingly used to give attention and care to Krona whenever he used to come to her in search of guidance and love. She also used to appear as a caring parent on whom Krona could rely fully. However, the truth was otherwise. In fact, she was a monster who stared at her own child and could see nothing but an experiment to be demolished and dominated. Well, I think she is a bad teacher and a bad mother, since she embodies the most full portrait of parental and institutional abuse in one person in the series. She had never taught Krona how to love or be a human. Instead, she was teaching them intimidation, obedience, and utter dependence on her approval. Being a nurse at the DWMA, she was portrayed as warm and approachable as she collected intelligence and planted literal snake vectors among students and staff to control them. But as a mother, she was much worse. She lived Krona entirely on her own. She tortured them with years of both mental and physical abuse. She imprisoned Krona in black rooms bare of any lights as a form of punishment on failures perceived. She forced them to kill tiny things in their early training and corrected the emotional reaction to the hateful act. She put black blood in them, making her own baby an experiment since she was born. The influence of Medusa was very bad on all people around her, due to the fact that all the rules of Medusa, all her teachings, had turned the DWMA into a haven of concealed death where all the students and staff surrounding her were in danger of being manipulated. The trespassing of Medusa in the DWMA had caused instability to the whole academy and endangered all the students and teachers. But they tell me that what comes round goes round. She would have to pay a price to this. Medusa was killed at the very beginning by Stein in spirit, but her soul was transferred to Young Girl and she did not stop working. She was later on killed once more by her own sister Arachne in a family betrayal incident that was a perfect reflection of how she treated all people around her. However, the series is sincere enough to admit that even her death would not be able to fix the damage. She enwrapped herself in nurse whites and motherly speech and scientific isolation and made each of them cover with her abuse. She stared at her own child and he enjoyed an experiment. She stared at a school with children and considered that it is a resource. It was not motherhood that she had done to Krona. It was wicked with a human mask. Next is Baron Zemo from Avengers. Earth's Mightiest Heroes. One of the major villains of Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, is Baron Heinrich Zemo, the former HYDRA scientist, mastermind during the World War II, who was frozen into the modern world, and the founder and leader of the Masters of Evil, a group of supervillains brought together with the sole purpose of destroying the Avengers. He is a strategist, an ideologue, and a man whose whole personality is stilled into the philosophy that power and supremacy can grant him dominance over others absolutely. Zemo would talk to his members of the Masters of Evil in an authoritative and visionary tone whenever he recruited them. He also used to appear as a strong leader who they could entrust and follow to achieve victory. But the fact was otherwise. In fact, he was a man who could not get them to be a team, but a tool to be put into services and dropped. He desired to have domination over everything, and he would dominate everything by the use of contempt and ideology that superior people were supposed to rule over the weak. Well, to me, the man is a bad teacher and a bad authority figure because his whole leadership code was constructed on the basis of contempt, inviting the cloak of ideology. He never nurtured the folks under him, never making an effort to know them or to grow them beyond what they could bring to his cause. He was a leader by excellence other than a motivator. His philosophy that individuals of superior kind had a right to lead him tainted all the dynamics in the Masters of Evil. And the most awful scene was the attack of the Masters of the Evil on Avengers Mansion, one of the most violent scenes in the whole show. Zemo made a well-planned attack and seized the biggest part of the Avengers and Mansion. What made it his defining moment though was the way he handled the aftermath, not only with cold, theatrical superiority, but also in handling the captured Avengers as a prize to be shown as an example of his superiority, but not an enemy that should be even acknowledged with any respect. This is when Zemo might have exercised moderation. He would have been able to recognize the success of his team. Rather, he made the victory his personal victory, going around his conquest with his head held high like a man inspecting property he possessed. The Masters of Evil led by Zemo was a picture of what occurs when an authority figure does not take followers as valuable assets. The members were set out, discarded, and blamed to fail, without having any real association with the cause of the leader. But they say the same thing: what goes round comes round. Throughout the series, his schemes backfired and the Avengers resorted to strapping down the Masters of the Evil and destroying them. His ideological certainty, which was his strongest asset as a schemer, turned his most serious weakness. The thing is that Baron Zemo was not a leader. He was a narcissist man who created a team of people to reflect his superiority. The Avengers are not the only ones who defeated him. The natural result of guiding people and at the same time harboring contempt towards them was his losing. That is the real extent of his failure. Next, Scar from The Lion King is the younger brother of King Mufasa and the uncle of Simba in Disney's The Lion King. He holds the title of heir to the Pride Lands and serves as a senior member of the royal family, someone who should by position and blood be a guide, protector, and mentor to the young prince. Whenever Simba came to him for guidance, Scar used to talk to him very warmly and nicely, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was a manipulator who had orchestrated the death of his own brother. He wanted the throne above everything. Well, in my opinion, he never mentored Simba. He used him as a pawn. He fed Simba's natural curiosity and youthful bravado to manipulate him into dangerous situations. His entire relationship with his nephew was not mentorship, but exploitation and calculated murder. And the worst moment was the wildebeest stampede, the moment that defined Scar's cruelty. He orchestrated the death of his own brother, his own king. When Mufasa was hanging over the gorge with a chance to survive, Scar had the power to save him. But instead, he dangled him there and whispered, "Long live the king," before dropping him to his death. And then the most devastating part, he walked directly to the traumatized cub standing over his father's body and told him he killed Mufasa. He converted his own murder into a child's guilt in real time. Simba's entire life was destroyed by Scar's single well-placed lie, but later on, he had to face brutal consequences for this. Simba returned, confronted Scar, and forced him to admit the truth in front of the entire pride. Scar attempted one last act of treachery, but he was defeated. And then, in a moment of perfect justice, he tried to shift the blame onto the hyenas. The hyenas, who had been his allies throughout his reign, overheard his betrayal and turned on him. Scar died at the hands of the allies he had spent the whole film exploiting. The fact is that Scar was never a real uncle or a real king. He was a murderer who put a mask of wisdom and care. He never had any intention of helping Simba or protecting the Pride Lands. He only wanted the throne and power, no matter the cost. That is not villainy. That is cruelty with a vocabulary. Next is Shou Tucker Full Metal. Shou Tucker is a state alchemist licensed by the military and known as the Suing Life Alchemist for his specialty in biological transmutation. He is renowned for having created a chimera that could speak human words, a feat so rare it earned him his state alchemist certification. He is also a father to a young girl named Nina and her dog Alexander. Whenever Nina came to him seeking guidance and love, Shou Tucker used to show her warmth and affection. He used to show her that he is a very caring and devoted father, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was a monster who viewed his own daughter not as a person, but as raw material for his experiments. He wanted his state alchemist license above everything. Well, in my opinion, he's a bad teacher and a bad father because his entire life was built on the corruption of intellectual mentorship and human values. He never taught Nina anything about love or kindness or morality. Instead, He modeled the idea that academic achievement and the pursuit of knowledge justify any cost. He presented himself as a man of science pursuing knowledge. And the worst moment was when Shu Tucker, facing the annual review that would determine whether he kept his state alchemist license, made a calm, calculated decision. He fused his own daughter Nina and her dog Alexander into a chimera. He destroyed his own child to save his career. Nina Tucker spent her short life loving someone who was preparing to destroy her. But they say that what you give is what you get. He had to face consequences for this. In the 2003 anime, Tucker was eventually killed by Scar, who targeted state alchemists. In Brotherhood in the manga, he was arrested by the military. Shu Tucker didn't lose his mind or snap under pressure. He made a calm, calculated decision to destroy his daughter to save his career. He's the villain that exists in the real world, the person who chooses ambition over love and calls it science. Next is Syndrome by The Incredibles. Syndrome, born Buddy Pine, is the main antagonist of Pixar's The Incredibles. As a child, he was the self-proclaimed #1 fan of Mr. Furstore. Incredible and obsessive gifted young boy who showed up uninvited as a sidekick, calling himself Incrediboy. The relationship between young Buddy and Mr. Incredible was explicitly that of an eager apprentice seeking mentorship, validation, and acceptance from his hero. Well, in my opinion, Syndrome was a bad teacher and a bad authority figure because his entire philosophy was based on a lack of good mentorship. He is both the product of abandonment and a catastrophically destructive leader. Mr. Incredible's dismissal of young Buddy was cold, public, and humiliating, telling a child who idolized him that he works alone and to go home. That single moment of rejection planted something toxic in Buddy Pine. He never recovered from it. He had no mentor to redirect his genius toward anything constructive. Instead, he grew into the mirror image of Mr. Incredible's failure, a man who built an empire purely to prove that he mattered. He used to show the world a fake persona of innovation and technology, but in reality, he was intentionally luring and killing real superheroes for years, using them as test subjects to train his Omnidroid robots. He used to live in his base with his technology while superheroes died. And the worst moment was when Syndrome revealed his grand plan to Bob Parr, explaining with genuine glee his desire to destroy the very concept of being special. He had developed technology that would make everyone super, and when everyone is super, nobody will be. At that moment, Syndrome could have moved past his childhood trauma. He could have used his genius to build something constructive, but instead, he chose to burn it all down because a hero once told him to go home. And Syndrome's influence had a very bad impact on everyone around him. Syndrome's Omnidroid program killed superheroes across the entire world. Buddy Pine's genius could have changed the world. Instead, it nearly ended it. He had to face consequences for this. Syndrome was defeated by the Incredibles working as a family, the exact thing he never had and could never build. Syndrome is what happens when a gifted, lonely child reaches up toward a hero and gets his hand slapped away. He is not a villain because he was born evil. He is a villain because the person he needed most told him to go home. Next is Aizen from the Bleach. Aizen is the captain of Squad 5 in the Gotei 13, the governing military body of Soul Society in Bleach. He is one of the most respected, beloved, and trusted captains in the entire organization, known for his calm demeanor, extraordinary intelligence, and apparent warmth toward his subordinates. He mentors multiple Soul Reapers directly, most significantly Momo Hinamori, his lieutenant, who trusts him with a devotion that borders on worship. Whenever Hinamori came to him seeking guidance, Aizen used to talk to her very warmly and kindly, but the reality was something else. Actually, he was a manipulator who had spent years cultivating her emotional dependency as a weapon. In my view, he's a horrible teacher, and his whole method of mentoring was the most sophisticated form of manipulating people throughout the entire series. Everything he did in order to maintain his power and position was achieved through manipulation or deception. In the moment that was the worst, when Aizen's betrayal being revealed, he could have chosen to leave Soul Society quietly, but he opted not to. Instead, he staged a theatrical murder to leave maximum chaos and suspicion within the Soul Society by staging a murder and having all the details of his murder scripted out. When Hinamori went to avenge her captain, she found herself standing in front of the real Aizen, whom she believed had been murdered and could have shown her mercy. He could have explained himself. He could have acknowledged the genuine connection they had built, but instead his response was cold and absolute. He ran her through with his sword without hesitation. Even after everything, even after he stabbed her, even after his betrayal was exposed, she struggled to fully hate him because the attachment he built was that deep and real to her. Though Aizen was so powerful that consequence itself had to be specially engineered for him, and he was sentenced to 20,000 years of imprisonment in the deepest underground prison in Soul Society. Bound in a chair with sealing technology covering his entire body, Aizen never lost control, never acted out of anger, never made a mistake he did not intend. And that is exactly what makes him so devastating as a mentor figure. He is the villain who calculated every moment of connection, every word of praise, every gesture of care-all as part of a grand design where people were never anything more than instruments in his symphony of deception. Next is Jing Free CSS from Hunter 10. Again, one of the most efficient heroes alive in Hunter x Hunter is Jing Free CSS, one of them, a double-star ruins hunter, a founder of the Zodiac 12, and generally regarded as one of the 5 best users of Nen in the world. He is also Gon Frasisse's father. He left Gon behind as a baby and was left to be raised by his Aunt Mito on Whale Island, and spent a few years touring the world chasing his personal goals without having any form of contact with his son. He would make himself feel that he was doing the right thing, that adventure and freedom was more than presence. In addition to this, he even resembled a man who philosophized his way to become a hero, to sacrifice the common associations of family to something higher, but the truth was otherwise. In fact, he was a man who was too absorbed in his own ambitions to an extent that he justified dumping his child as an act of wisdom. He never misused, Gon, or warped him. His harm came in a more sinister manner, in the absence and ideology. He made a philosophy where personal freedom, adventure, and the pursuit of individual desire were the utmost values, and lived by that worldview to its full potential, to the point that his own child was an acceptable casualty of it. However, the truth is that he was consciously giving precedence to all the adventures, all the discovery, all the instances of personal satisfaction at the expense of the child that he had made. He confused egoism with philosophy and named his renouncement enlightenment. And the most bad was the rooftop scene of the end of Chimera Ant Arc. No longer a wholly destroyed man after nearly destroying himself in the quest to exact revenge and mourning, Gon was brought back and was eventually able to see his father in person on the summit of the World Tree. The climax of reunion that the whole series had been leading up to at last came. Jing would have made a true father at that time. He might have provided true presence. His answer, however, was habitual, nearly violent himself, irregular and evasive and incapable at that particular moment of practicing the emotional availability which demanded. He discussed adventure when his son had to be acknowledged, but they claimed that what comes around comes round. There were no official repercussions on Jing, and the show did not serve as a dramatic payback on his behalf. What he met was more subtle. The World Tree reunion brought him the presence of Gon, and nothing more than that. Gon had pardoned him, or nearly, with the reproving good nature which was his lot. Forgiveness, however, which is caused to a child who has been raised to idolize you, does not equal absolution. Gon deserved better. Jing knew it. His next adventure was worth more, as he has just decided. Next is Griffith from Berserk. Griffith is the leader and founder of the Band of the Hawk, a legendary mercenary band that emerges out of nothing and emerges as the most glorified military organization in the Kingdom of Midland. He is the closest friend of Guts, the commander, and the most valuable person in his life over years. Griffith always met with the members of the Band of the Hawk with a warm and inspirational demeanor whenever they would discuss with him about guidance and leadership. He could demonstrate to them that he is a leader with a beautiful dream. To top it all, he could actually resemble the image of someone that they could depend upon entirely and follow blindly. But it was not really like that. In reality, he was a manipulator and considered all followers as his instruments of his rise to power. Well, I think he is a bad teacher and a bad authority figure. However, in the real sense, he was deliberately raising individuals who were so much attached to him that would perish unquestioningly when the time arrived. And the most terrible thing was the eclipse, the one most disastrous betrayal in anime and manga history. By turning on the billet, Griffith made each and every member of the Band of the Hawk be devoured by demons to be reborn as Femto, so he could further his dream of becoming a god. He then attacked Casca in the presence of powerless Guts. Before his transformation occurred to its fullest extent, the Band of the Hawk was practically destroyed. Guts lost the love of a woman. The trauma shattered the mind of Casca. The whole life of Guts post-eclipse is the direct and complete result of what Griffith stole out of him in one act of betrayal in serene stillness. However, they say that what comes around comes around. No, not completely at least. And that is the most truthful and heart-rending storytelling decision ever made by Berserk. Griffith came back as Femto and refounded the Band of the Hawk, brought in new followers, started to build the city of Falcania, and also made himself a savior of humanity. The world rewarded him. His toxic system did not break down. He is the image of a leader who was fully aware of what he was doing and made his vision worth more than even human life itself. Principal from American Dad. In American Dad, the main authority figure of the group of friends of Steve Smith is Principal Lewis, who is the principal of the Pearl Bailey High School. He is boastful, egocentric, ethically bankrupt, and hugely unsuited to his job in a manner that the show considers as comedy. He is a man who has control over hundreds of teenagers. Lewis would also make himself appear authoritative and confident whenever students approached him to seek guidance and support. He would appear like a character whom students could confide in and rely on their issues, but that was not the truth of the matter. I think he is a bad teacher and a bad authority figure, as his whole attitude to his job was on extraction instead of education. He never showed students a lesson about integrity or responsibility. However, in actual sense, he was deliberately abusing school resources to personal advantage. All his leadership did not involve education, but stealing by institutions, stealing a salary and a title with no return whatsoever to the students he was meant to serve. And the most terrible thing was, not a single classic scene but a uniform, asphyxiating policy of conduct which had added up to a portrait of such negligence. His failure is well exemplified by any scene in which one of the students took him to a real crisis, such as a case of bullying or a learning problem or a real need. And his reaction was to turn it into one about himself. Lewis might have been a real grown man at such times. He might have provided actual direction. He might have exercised his power to assist. Rather, he always responded to things by swerving due to the combination of all the rules of Lewis, all his methods. Pearl Bailey High School had turned out to be a place where students basically operated without any realistic adult infrastructure backing them. But they say what goes around comes around. In the comic reasoning behind American Dad, Lewis would be punished and grossly held responsible one episode at a time until the reset button restored the world to normal. The thing is that Principal Lewis was neither an educator nor an administrator. He's the authority figure, the one who never actually existed, and in a list of grotesque monsters that elaborate quiet absence is precisely what makes him so excruciatingly real.